How can you find the right PhD supervisor? That's very important. How can you start a PhD if you're not sure yet what your true interests are? Welcome to Frank Stajano Explains. I'm a professor at the University of Cambridge and I give people PhDs in computer science, so I know a little more about PhDs in technical subjects than those who speak only from their personal experience of having done one themselves. In this series of videos, 5 of my undergraduate students are asking me what they want to know about a PhD. The previous video in this series is linked up there. Join us and ask your own questions in the comments if you wish.
Next, please. Okay, so do you have any advice for sort of choosing the supervisors and research groups that you actually work with? Sort of, are there any particular signals of good quality to look out for? And I guess perhaps more importantly, sort of signals that the research group cares about its PhD students.
Right. Well, certainly choosing the right PhD supervisor is a crucial decision in this process, because one way of viewing the PhD is that the PhD is an apprenticeship about research. Okay, you are going to go from just someone who's good at, in our case, computer science, to someone who is a member of the peer group of the people who make the new bits of computer science. So the people with a PhD in a field are the people who advance the frontiers of research in that field. And the process of you getting the PhD is you basically getting the entry card into that peer group. And once you're there, then you're just one of us. And so to become one of us, someone has to mentor you throughout, and you're going to become their apprentice. And you have to choose someone that, first of all, you like and admire and respect, and you'd wish to be like them. That's point number one. And number two is that it has to be someone that on a personal level you get along well with, that you enjoy meeting them, you enjoy having a chat with them, and you think, every time you go there, that was so stimulating and exciting, and I had such a good time. And not someone who, now I have to have a meeting with supervisor. Every time I see that guy, I'm sweating, cold breeze, and I'm so scared, and I dread the moment I have to knock on that door. You don't want to have that for several years. So you have to choose someone, not only that you admire and respect on a scientific, academic viewpoint, but also someone that you actually get along well with on a personal feelings viewpoint. You'd like to go and do social activities with you. And if you have dinner, it's not a duty, but it's an enjoyable thing. So it's important. It's very important to choose a supervisor that's good for you, and it's not an absolute thing. It's a relative thing. So some supervisor, it is not the case that there's a great supervisor and a rubbish supervisor. It is more the case that all these people, they already have PhDs, professorship, whatever. They are luminaries in their own respective subfields, but this one would be good for you. This one would not be a good fit for you, but maybe it would be a great fit for him or for her, right? And so you have to choose who is the one that is doing the things that excite you, and is excited about the things that you're excited about, that would be excited about what you plan on doing, but also that you like each other. You have to like that person, and they have to like you. I mean, if only you like them, but they don't like you, that's also not a good fit. If you think, this guy, always thinks he's too clever, or always writes super complicated things that I can't be bothered reading, and so on and so on. It may not be the person who appreciates what you're good at. I mean, me, all of us will have aspects that make us great and aspects that make us a pain in the ass, right? So some people who will not be able to stand some of the stuff I do. They say, this guy, Frank Stajano, I could never work with a guy like this, because this and this that he does, it just rubs me up the wrong way. It just doesn't work for me. I can't work with that guy. And so that is part of your assessment as well. You have to get along. And that, on a personal basis, it will come after having chosen someone who is academically and scientifically and intellectually in the direction you want to go. Because first of all, I mean, you can't choose someone just because you get along well with them if they're not doing what you want to do. That doesn't work. So first of all, you choose in the intellectual direction you want to go, who is someone that I like what they do. I'd like to be like them, and can I learn from them how to be like them, or how to go further than them, and so on and so on. And then second, after that, once you've narrowed it down to that extent, you have to see, well, which one of these people is one that I'd like to work with. And there you can start, for example, from your final year undergraduate dissertation, that, as we said, is not research, but it will give you a flavor for how it is to work with that person. It will give you a flavor for how that person would look after you for, in that case, just several months, but it's a kind of another way of trying before you buy, for a commitment. Would I want to commit for several years to working with that person? And also the way that a supervisor would supervise a PhD student can be very different in different cases. That there's a whole spectrum of very hands-on and very hands-off type of supervisor, and some things that work well for one person will not work very well for another person. Some people, as in the PhD student, would like to have lots of independence and say, let's agree on something, and then I go away for 6 months and I do my own stuff, and then we talk about it, and you give me some high-level intellectual direction on what's the bit that's missing and where I could go and so on. And I don't want to have someone who's breathing down my neck every week, something like that, because I feel that it just constrains me in what I can do. And someone else would be like, I'm just so junior, I don't know what to do, and I have this imposter syndrome and all that stuff. I would like someone who helps me out on a much more ongoing, continuous basis, and I like to be able to get reassurance and support that what I'm doing is making progress kind of every week, every 2 weeks, and so on. And different PhD students will have different things that they want, and different PhD supervisors will have different styles that they are happy with. And you have to match that as well, because someone can be, the greatest Turing Award, Nobel Prize winner, whatever, and so on, but might not have the patience or the interest to follow someone on a, every time you write a program, they go through it line by line with you, or every time you write a paper, they check every sentence and so on. And so you might like that person for the intellectual direction, but it might not fit the supervision style if you do want someone who's actually very hands-on in supervision. And the opposite may happen. You may have a brilliant early career academic who is very driven and emerging rising star kind of person, who's going to be very, very involved in everything, and every time you write a paper, and it's going to be one of their first 10 papers anyway, and so they will want to go every sentence with you and say this and that. And for some, it's a blessing. It's exactly what you want. For some others, it's like, I don't feel it's my own stuff anymore, because everything I do, then this supervisor has to put their fingers in it. And so you have to understand what you want, and then you have to find someone who's a match at that level as well, which is not the same as do you get along, because you could get along, but you could have different expectations in that. And so doing something that involves an interaction on a technical level with that person during your undergraduate is something that would be a good way to try with that particular person. Now, clearly, that gives you a narrow scope of the people you can try this with, because it's going to be typically someone in your department, or at least someone in Cambridge that you can do something about during your undergrad. Or if you are interested in exploring something beyond those boundaries, and you're sufficiently enterprising, then you could look for that in one of the summer internships you've mentioned. Say, well, okay, and I'm going to go to some other famous university, or famous or not famous, some other university where there's someone that I like over the summer. And you have to prepare your ground, you have to start reading the papers and maybe suggesting something else, have a correspondence with them and say, could I come next summer? Is this something where, do you have something for me to work on? Would you like me? Blah, 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 blah. And you try. And that's finding whether this dream you're having, because you've made an image of this, working with this person, is it the true when you actually work with that person? And the more you try this out beforehand, and the more informed your choice will be later. So we're having this discussion now. Some of you are first year, and it's fine. It's fine to start thinking about this early, because then it gives you more chances when you're still in the system to try out various things. And you can try one this summer, you can try one another summer, you can try something else, your final year dissertation, and then you've already seen 3 different styles, 3 different people, 3 different ways of leading or advising someone in something. And you can say, actually, something that I tried 2 years ago, I actually like that style better, but not with that person. And then you go off and look for a PhD supervisor somewhere else, but having been informed by the various things that you try. Another thing you can do, which is definitely worth doing, you are in this wonderful college system which gives you links to other students. And so you can go and talk with other students who've been there before you, that you've made friends throughout your course, and maybe by the time you get to the stage you choose for a PhD, they're already in their professional life, or they're already in their PhD, and so on and so on. Or maybe the even more years of a gap between you, but you met them at some student society when you were in your first or second year. If you keep in touch with all these, then you have people to talk to and say, well, you did a PhD with that guy. How was it? Can you tell me? And so on. And that's a useful source of insider information from different perspectives. And that's worth doing. Of course, their experience is not going to be your experience. I mean, I've supervised a bunch of people, and some of them are now a full professor, and some of them just quit halfway through because they couldn't stand me. So if you ask the 2 of them, one of them is Frank was the best supervisor possible, and the other one, Frank was shit supervisor. So do your due diligence, and don't believe the first thing you hear will necessarily apply to you. But you won't. I mean, the more you hear, and the more informed your subsequent decisions can be. Okay.
So my first question is, generally speaking, PhD is considered the end for exploratory learning. It's the point you say, I want to specialize in something. However, during the time of the PhD, and I guess immediately afterwards, how feasible it is to explore both close to your subject that shows as PhD and other areas of computer science, in search of maybe finding something that's also of at least equal interest to you.
So, can you reread the first part of the question? Your PhD was the end. I'm not sure I understand what you meant.
Yes, of exploratory learning, just seeing various areas of computer science and thinking, oh, this looks interesting, and figuring out what you're good at and what you like, and finding somewhere in the middle to...
Right, so what you're saying, I mean, I'll just try to rephrase your question before I answer it, otherwise I might answer something else. And you tell me if I'm expressing your question correctly or not. So you're saying the PhD is at the time where I've tried various things in computer science to see which one I actually like, and by the time I do the PhD, I have to have decided which one it is, because after that I can't keep changing my mind. Is this more or less it?
Yes, and if it's possible to kind of still continue searching and exploring how possible it is during a PhD and how limiting it is a PhD to one specific field.
Okay, so I think it's, the stuff I'm thinking about now is an answer that is not exactly an answer to your question, but is an answer that's inspired by your question, which is when is the right time to do a PhD? And so one part of the answer would be, if you don't yet know what it is that you actually are really passionate about, then maybe it's too early to do a PhD. Then you first need to figure it out, and you can spend more time figuring it out. And then you should do a PhD, because at that point you have to focus on something. A PhD is something where you need sufficient concentration that if you're not focused, then you're not going to, I mean, you have a block of steel, and to make a cut through the steel, your laser has to be focused, right? If it's just diffused, then it's not going to cut through the steel. And so you need to focus your laser. And if you are not at the stage where you have focused it on something and you can keep the focus up for several years, then it's not going to cut through the steel. And so maybe it's too early to do a PhD if you still don't know whether you prefer this area of computer science to this other one. But another part of the answer is that what you do in your PhD is not a curse, and is not a steel ball and chain attached to your ankle for your whole life. And it is just a stepping stone. It's not the defining direction of your whole career. You can do many more things after your PhD that have nothing to do with your PhD. And in fact, people who don't have a PhD think of the PhD in some super mega galactic way that is not necessarily what it is. You know, you do a PhD on something, then you finish, you get the degree, you hang it on the wall if you feel like, and then you move on and do something else. You don't have to stick with that same thing for the next 40 years, right? It's certainly possible to, do a PhD in a topic and then have a career which develops through a variety of other topics. So, in that sense, well, it is a commitment. You have to spend several years on that. But several years, 3-4 years, and that's it. After that, you can still do other things. You can, you paid your dues. You're now a member of this peer community, and within this peer community, you can explore still other things. Of course, you will be an expert on that topic X. You will not be an expert on the other ones unless you invest as many years in the other ones as well. So, if you are willing to restart from zero, of course, you can redo the same. It's not necessarily a good idea to plan on doing several PhDs, because you don't really gain anything else from the extra PhDs. In a sense that most of the gain from the PhD is in the process, not in the content, right? And so whatever the content of your PhD ultimately is irrelevant 20 years later, right? What did I do my PhD on? Not many people know. I mean, they can go and look it up, but it's not something that defines the rest of the stuff I do, right? And so you shouldn't feel constrained by having chosen topic for PhD. However, you have to be sufficiently interested and committed to that. You're going to then focus on it seriously for enough years that at the end of it, you will become the expert on that topic, the worldwide expert. People talk about that specific topic. It's going to be very narrow. They're going to mention your name, right? And that only comes with extreme, intense specialization. People have to be aware that if they're talking about that sub problem of a subfield of blah blah, then you're the expert because you wrote that paper in that conference, blah blah blah, and they have to cite that. Maybe just that, but at least on that, you're the boss. And then this doesn't last because, of course, this thing goes out of fashion and so on and so on. So you have to keep things up by keeping on doing innovative things in that field, which gives you a head start because you're the expert. At least at that point, you got the PhD, you were the expert on that. Or in other things. I mean, you can diversify and do other innovative things in other subfields where you gradually become competent, and that's fine. So all of that is possible, and you shouldn't be scared about if I choose to work in complexity theory, then I will be obliged to do complexity theory for all my life. No, you don't have to. You can do a PhD in complexity theory and then become a specialist in something else, in financial or compilers, or I don't know. That's not an obligation to stick with the same subject. The first part of the answer that I mentioned is that you don't have to do a PhD until you know for sure that you are going to enjoy working for several years on that topic. Because a PhD is not a big deal, but it is some kind of a deal. So it does require some commitment. It does require an intense period of work. And it's a kind of magical period which almost never happens the rest of your life, where you can concentrate completely on a problem without worrying about anything else. I mean, after that you have other things to do, with a boss that keeps changing what they want out of you. You will have a family to look after, you will have commitments to the place where you live, and paying rent or paying mortgage or all that kind of stuff, and having children, all the other things of life that are, for now, you don't have to worry about while you do the PhD. And you just work on that problem, like you're yourself in a log cabin and you just have great ideas, that kind of stuff. It basically never happens like the rest of your life. We kind of make it easy for you during PhD. It looks very hard while you're doing it, but actually it's very easy compared to real life, which comes afterwards. And that period of great creativity and ideas and stuff and so on can also be very difficult and demanding and lots of pressure, because by the end of this I'm supposed to have produced X. Will I be able to produce X? And you're at the point where it doesn't seem to work yet. Will I be able now in another year and a half to do this? It will never work. I'm a failure. Everybody else is so much more clever than me. How can I do that? And all that stuff will happen. And it happens to everyone. And then, for most people, you eventually get over it and you realize it doesn't have to be as grandiose as you thought it needed to be, so long as there's some substance. And when you're in there, when you're in the deep of it, you don't see that you've actually produced something that's worthy. But you have, and a good supervisor will reassure you, don't worry about it. Just publish the fucking paper, okay? And you got 4 or 5 papers, then you put them together. That's a dissertation. And you don't have to worry about all the stuff you worry about. That's okay. Your supervisor will just pat you on the back and say, just do the work. Trust me, it will be all right. But a prerequisite for that is that you are actually deeply committed to that particular topic. If it's let me see if I like combinatorics more than I like compilers, more than I like graphics, more than I like natural language processing, more than I like artificial intelligence and machine learning and all that stuff, it's not going to work. You can't sustain that pressure if you're unsure what you actually like. So don't do it in that case. If you say blah 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 blah, you're not ready for a PhD, because it requires a level of driven commitment such that at that stage you will just burn out halfway through. So first, find something that you're sufficiently committed to, that you're willing to sign off your life for the next 3 or 4 years. Then when you do it, it will still be hard. It will still be, you get to a point where you doubt of yourself. You can be the guy who eventually wins the Nobel Prize. You can ask them, and they will still say, yeah, that was a point towards the middle of my PhD where it was so hard that I thought I would never finish. It happens for everyone, so that's fine. So don't worry about it. But most people who go in with the right attitude and with the right initial capabilities will then get out, and you too. And if you've chosen the right supervisor, then the right supervisor will guide you through that psychologically difficult part of the process. But it has to start from a position where you're actually going in seriously on that topic because you're interested in that topic. But with that, you have then the reassurance that you're not going to be shackled to that topic forever. Does this answer the question?
It does, yeah.
Okay, good.
I hope you are finding these questions and answers instructive. If you do, please stick a like on the video. My chat with these 5 students goes on, and I'll be answering more of their questions in the next installment, which will be linked here in due course. Subscribe and hit the notification bell if you wish to be told as soon as the next episode comes out. If you have your own questions, stick them in the comments saying the word cherry to let me know you've made it to the end, for which I thank you very much. See you next time.